I'm Snow White. Once upon a time, there lived an ambitious king who did not achieve that status by being nice. He was slick enough to appear good on the surface, but he was controlling and ruthless at heart. His name was Day. That is spelled D-E-I. Day had won most people over when he was still a prince, so when his parents passed, no one thought anything was amiss when he took the throne. Although he talked so much about diversity, inclusivity, equity, and fairness, King Day's communist ideals, which went hand in hand with his lust for control, began compelling him to make gradual decisions and changes that caused some of his subjects to suffer. Day was the king, and Day would decide who deserved inclusion in his brand of fair treatment. His subjects either did not mind or did not dare to protest. They knew what would happen to anyone who displeased King Day. They would be publicly shamed, then sent into exile. But King Day wasn't happy with just being king. He had his eye on neighboring kingdoms. His ambition was to make them all his own empire. Much as he desired this power, he knew he had to go about it carefully. He kept up appearances of friendliness when dealing with other rulers, but reached out to people among their general populations, feeling out which ones to recruit into his scheme. He sought out people who were already discontent with their own countries, and they brought even more people to him. King Day kept promising his large group of followers they would eventually conquer the surrounding lands, but they would have to do it in stages. As King Day's nation gained more influence and people from other countries, he was expelling his own subjects who refused to submit to his ideologies. Among his followers was an especially zealous group known as the Geslers. They studied Day's manifesto diligently and were the most dedicated to his mission. Time passed, and King Day felt confident enough to name a date and time for the first conquest. The problems with the Geslers started immediately after that. Within days, there were reports of violent crimes against some high-status citizens of a neighboring country, committed by some of the Geslers. They admitted to it under questioning. Surprised their actions were not praised to the sky. They were let off with a gentle admonishment. King Day addressed the problem at his next meeting with them, telling them he fully backed everything they stood for, but reminded them this was not the time to use force. But with each passing day, the Geslers grew more impatient. They wanted Day's socialism to spread over many nations as much as the king did, but they just weren't seeing what they termed as progress. There were more Gesler attacks on surrounding lands, and then the other countries began fighting back. They started prohibiting the Geslers from entering their countries, and those that had lived there were forced to leave. King Day continued to shelter and make excuses for them until an art gallery fire was traced back to them. This put King Day's conquest plans on hold, and he was not pleased about it. More time passed, and despite the odd Gesler situation continuing to get worse, King Day finally set another date to launch his attack on the other nations. Some of those kings still did business with him, with a few others shying away. But a little trouble did not cause King Day to think he would fail. Incredibly, he still thought he could win enough people over and then conquer them. Unfortunately for him, some overzealous Geslers spread the news of the attack to one of the nations just the day before King Day's forces would strike. So when he sent his forces out, there was a terrible battle in which all sides suffered heavy casualties. The nastiest shock for King Day was the number of people he lost. He had been so sure he would conquer that land by the end of the day and go on to subdue the other kingdoms soon after. The tables had turned. Now he found not only the Geslers were unwelcome in every other kingdom, but he was also unwelcome. Some kings closed their borders to his people, and others retaliated by sending their armies into his kingdom to attack it. This was when King Day expelled the Geslers from his forces and sent frantic messages out to the other kings, claiming the attacks were not ordered by him. He told them the Geslers had acted on their own. The Geslers found themselves unwelcome in every nation and kingdom. Everywhere they turned up, they were met with suspicion and hostility. They ended up settling on a piece of land no one had claimed, with a climate nearly as inhospitable as the people had been. They were left trying to reach out to anyone, claiming that they were only doing what King Day had wanted them to do. And that's where it stands. King Day represents the Disney Company. The Geslers represent Miss Rachel Zegler, the star of the epic flop that was Disney's 2025 Snow White movie.